Probably target swapping because I mean, most times people would say like block on the line, but like that can only get you so far. So sometimes I'd really recommend that being a good target swapper so you can at least trade one before you die is also beneficial.
Mhm. Would you put target swapping above things like up downs or blocking?
Um, um, I'd probably put it over blocking, but I think up downing is probably crucial too. Probably more crucial than target swapping. I kind of forgot about that.
Has to be blocking. If you're not staying alive, you're not learning. The biggest thing I tell people when they're learning fighting is like, if you act scared and you're just like afraid of people stabbing you, you're never gonna learn to block them. You're gonna die and you're gonna feel bad about it. That's the only way you're gonna get better. Things like movement will kind of come naturally, you know. And as much as it'll upset you, I think you could have really sucky movement and be a top player, bro. You you could be the Pasha biceps of Holdfast, bro. Like, you'd be all right.
To improve at group fighting specifically, the only thing that matters is really updowning. Like, doesn't matter how good the other person is if you just can throw an up down at them. I think it's either that or it's either blocking, but both of them I think are super important. Though, like I said, if you can just hold a stab with a friend and count down 3, 2, 1 and release it at the same time, then it doesn't really matter if you're facing Chris, Reddish, or Adam or whoever else. If you do it right and don't fuck it up, then you'll get the kill, and it doesn't matter how good you are, or how good they are. Let's see, insta win, pretty much, most important skill.
100%.
Generally, I think that currently in group fighting, a lot of line phase feels very secondary. And obviously maintaining good line phase is very important. But I think that having just the basic abilities of not necessarily open melee, but teamwork within things like open melee. So a good ability to listen to calls and just generally using your head to get things like up downs and keeping an eye, mindfulness of your surroundings, I guess. Because obviously that comes into just knowing like group fighting as a whole and just group fighting sense. But I see a lot of times when new players seem to get really lost in the middle of a group fight. And I think kind of just having a good ability to know like where they are is quite important, because I've seen so many like new players just get very obviously confused and then die to things that they probably wouldn't die to otherwise. That could just be panic of trying new things, but I think an openness to listen. It's not something you can train mechanically, and it's something that you just kind of you can get tips every now and then. But I genuinely believe that is the most important part of developing as a group fighter, I guess, more so than mechanics.
If you're not able to listen, you're not able to listen to callouts. You're not able to listen to, hey, maybe I should block instead of just run in and hold a stab and then kill myself, right?
And it prevents players from going into that kind of bashing their head against a wall, because it makes them more. I tend to have found that people who are more willing to communicate, more willing to listen to things, are also more willing to take feedback. And that is also quite a big part in not just being the group fighter that's slamming your head into a wall trying to get better, but really struggling with it. I think it's a good, well-rounded aspect. I think the most well-rounded group fighters are all very big communication and awareness players, more so than perhaps mechanical gods.
I'm looking for the term. I'm trying to think of the term that intangible. It's very interesting that you brought up like an intangible aspect as opposed to, like you said, mechanical ability. And I think it's very interesting that you brought it up. Would you say that that's something that is a focus perhaps on the EU side? Because all the NA guys have been saying is telling me like blocking, up downs, fragging ability, that kind of thing.
I mean, I think I think the one that you've mentioned, it overlaps with up downs. I'd say, because you listen to comms for that, and I think that up downs are. If I hadn't have said that, I probably would have said teamwork in regards to up downs and such. But I mean, I don't think it's a particularly big thing on EU. I think a lot EU has a very large margin of mechanics first players. But I think just for me, I have never been. I've had my fair share of standout, mechanical moments. But I don't think I would never have called myself a mechanical god. I may hype myself up and I may have a bit of an ego, but I have never rated my actual mechanics to be as high. Especially recently, when I've really I think I've really come into my peak or around peak area recently, or the best I've ever been. But I think a lot of that is contributed towards taking on more IGL role and just the ability to call things instead of just being the person that played furthest and was the best duelist, so got far as a group fighter. And I think that I wish I'd worked on that sooner than I'd worked on maybe like more mechanical things. Also, it's just kind of like I said, it seems to be the more well-rounded players that do that, and I think it's something that it pulls people over the edge of really good player to really like incredible player. Because if I think of people that are really always know what's happening in a group fight, I can think like off the top of my head, the names that just came to my head are you, Starblazer, Elf, Va, Dux, like Bob the Builder. Like that is the people that instantly come to my head when I think of people that just know what's happening. And that communication. Even maybe some of those people are a bit more quiet, but they're all outspoken in group fights, and that's good. So, just the people I like married with over time, I think has also instilled that. So.
Is this against a specific team or just
Just in general, like you'd expect this player after this
Okay.
amount of hours to get around 20 kills.
I would say about 1,000 to 1,500 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Because getting kills in RGL are as hard as it is most times. So I think being a bit on the higher side would be beneficial.
I don't think it's that much because KO Destroyer absolutely farmed his couple of those matches, right? Like I don't think he has like that many hours, right? I think there are people like Stenson the 63 and people like maybe Awaken in the K rate that I think are more than capable of dropping kills in an RGL match. Can they do it consistently? I don't know. I think you're probably 500 total hours. I don't think like that needs to be all in melee. I think you'll just learn the game by playing it, period. But like I think you need enough in the game to at least know how to play the game competitively. And the reality of that is you need time.
Well, in RGL specifically, right? It's a lot more about teamwork. So, I think if you, if hours are directly related to kills, I feel like it's not that high actually. If you, are using those hours efficiently, I think if you put in, I don't know, even just like probably no more than 100 if you're doing the right things, to be able to consistently get a 20 kill game if you're getting the right training, being with the right team and stuff. But yeah, I think it's probably not that much. It depends on how efficiently you're using your time.
That's a bit of a tricky wording because RGL matches are of different caliber. I think that I'm a player that can at least get 20 kills in RGL matches, and I think it's. In my mind, I dropped 19 against the TRB. Terrible.
Sorry.
Not 20. But I mean, I think obviously, in the state of North American melees, there is some disparity between teams, obviously, and there's more things that you have to consider. But if it was just like you put in these hours, you're going to get this more often than not. For practice, it depends how you practice as well, really, and who you're practicing with. But do you mean hours per week or just at playtime overall in Holdfast?
I think playtime overall. It's more of like the threshold of, hey, if you get 200 hours, you get in quality practice with the best people you can that can help you get better at this. Like, how long would it take you to be able to get at a consistent level, hit those 20 frags at the very least? Like, you know, whether this may be like an RGL qualifier or the finals, you just reliably get 20 kills, which is pretty good.
I'm just trying to think of a player that's perhaps not a incredible fragger, but is going to get that. But obviously, I can't just take people's hours because that is a bit, you know, people do different things. But
Hours of practice, so like specifically training.
my 600, I think it takes a while. I do think I'd maybe not 600, maybe 500 or something. But I think there's so many variables. It's quite a difficult question to answer. But I think 600 is quite thingy because there's good players who have 300 hours that are maybe good duelists but are getting into group fighting. But then, you know, group fighting is really the difficult part to get better at. And if you're like your standard mid or con player, you can get consistently 20 at around 600 hours practice if you've really got the right mindset for it. Like, I mean, I'm a very high fragger type player, and I have 4,800. Granted, not all of that is melee, obviously, as a regiment leader, but there's a lot of practice in there, and I'm not the best. I was not, like I said, I don't think I'm the best mechanically, so I think 600 is a pretty reasonable number to say.
I think Seven Foods could probably be one of those underrated teams. They've got a lot of up and coming star players, and they've got solid depth too. I'd say maybe a surprise out of them could be possible. Same with KRA if they bring their EU people.
Seven Foos and KRA, I think, because I think any mention of 45E63 first is disingenuous to the concept of an upset. But I think those regiments are the two regiments that actually have pretty good ideas. I think 77th lack the star power a little bit, and they lack kind of the mid fraggers. I think that you'd like to see. There's not really like the Ghost isn't really the player I think like he needs to be if the 77th want to contend with those other two right there. And then KRA have enough star power and good players on EU that they can for that over. And like I said, we got an experienced core mid, just not in the right game. So as long as those guys don't throw, I think they're in a good spot. Seven Foos are kind of the same thing. They're coming in hot off of farming shitters in the lower bracket, but at the same time, you know, Reddish does the same thing against good players. Danny will continue to frag in mid as long as Danny exists, right? You have these players that have played multiple RGLs, and if they can do that, I think a bad day can most definitely occur for some of the top regiments. I don't think it's likely, but that's an upset.
There's a couple teams. I think the Seven Foos can be good. I think we can obviously get an upset. I think if I think there's a qualifier to the win against the 51st, but I think in some people's eyes it's an upset. I think really it's the team to beat right now. I think is the 63E, and so it's. I think there's a few teams that can do it, and they're close, like the KRA, Seven Foos, even 45E and us, but I think probably the biggest one is right now, at least like at this very moment. I think Seven Foos can probably upset 51st or even 63 or somebody if they keep on playing how they are and get better. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's somewhere between KRA, Seven Foos, and 77th can get a really good couple rounds and get a good couple matches, upset some people.
So everyone but the top three in TRB.
Yeah, I think that TRB just at least from what I know, they have kind of a leadership problem where they have two IGLs and both of them yell at each other during group fights, which doesn't work. And then
Not ideal.
51st I think also has maybe a leadership problem, maybe a communication problem. I think if you look at them, they're obviously really good individual players, but I don't know if their teamwork is super there. Same with 45E. I mean, you look at 45E, their depth on paper is very good. Their depth in practice is unpracticed. Like it's kind of clear to me at least that they didn't get enough team practice in, and so they didn't really know what they were doing. And I think 63, and I think because of that, 63 is the team to beat, and 45E and 51st, I think kind of have to pick it up a little bit to upset them. But I don't know if it'll be a huge upset if they were to win.
Is it ego to say the KRA?
No.
I think I have a good lineup. I think we have a really good lineup. If we get we can set a really solid 10 that can compete really well with even some of the higher teams. It's just about having those players and availability. And obviously availability is its own thing, but cards fall into place correctly. I think KRA could be in for an upset, more so than most other regiments. Obviously you still have those top three, 45E, 63, and 51st, but I wouldn't pull my card out of the hat that we couldn't beat one of those regs, or maybe two of those regs. Obviously, I'm going to keep going all the way until we get a KRA dub. But I think this year we can cause an upset and get a podium. I really do. At the very least.
I can see that, especially if you can get some 6:30 p.m. Eastern matches and maybe get some Eagles in.
Maybe Dux is around. Maybe Bandit. We can do well. Pepperoni. Asking me when RGL matches are. Yeah, ask me what Pepperoni asking me when RGL matches are. I give him an eye emoji and he sends me the middle finger back. Full roster.
It's like, he's keeping you on your toes. He's not telling you when, but he will be back.
He will be back. Yeah.
I don't think it's fair to say anyone from the regiment I'm in, since I think that's kind of a cop-out answer. So I'll take a second to think about this while I talk about the qualities, I guess. I think the biggest thing... Starboys are next. But yeah. I think the biggest thing is actual activity and an interest in learning. It can't just be things like, oh, well, they showed up to pickups once, right? There are a million players you can think of from any regiment that showed up to a pickups once and played. But showing up consistently active, you want to talk about people like Grumbler who actually went to a bunch of pickups and sizably improved, right? Yeah, versus people that show up to one pickups every once in a while and don't do good. I think just having that activity and wanting to learn is going to be a big thing. I think there's certain players, a lot of the current RGL generation or generational players at this point for the regiment, or at least have played in an RGL before. I think there are certain players in the KO that I think could actually be solid if they put some more time in. I think some Foos is kind of in a rough patch where I think we haven't seen any really good players come from them in a while. They've been the same good players since for the last 2 years, right? I don't think there's anyone there. KRA likewise. There are a couple players in the KRA that are all up and coming, but they're EU, so I don't really I don't really know too well. I don't think there's anyone that strikes my eye. I think right now, I don't think there's any really gems that we're hitting that are going to really hit that new level. I think Yin Yang is an okay shout. I'm gonna point that one out there. It's no longer like a last year pick. I think he actually fends for himself pretty alright. I think players like Cloud are a little past that point that you can call him developing next up. What was it? I was playing a guy in race the other day, actually. Alpha Star from the KO was pretty mechanically alright. I don't know how he does in group fights, but he was I actually had to hit him with stuff that would hit players with, so that was a good sign. But yeah, I don't really think I have any bold, super confident predictions this time around.
It's hard to say for individual players. I don't know all of them, but I think, at least for us specifically, Rock Squire has actually been somebody who, against the 51st, was his first real group fight and his second group fight. His only practice before then was a training and 2 pickup matches. So, I don't remember what his score was, but I mean he looked pretty decent. He definitely did not let us down. here. He went 15 and 23. It isn't not a good score line, but only for his first group fight against the 51st in mid, like that's a pretty good sign, I think. So
I might cheat and look at a pickup screenshot just because I need some refresher names. The name that immediately comes to my head is Seven Nation, but I don't. I've slightly taken a step back just due to personal burnout from NA scrims. I think that's potentially noticeable that I've been there a lot less. I think before I left, and before I took a slight break, Seven Nation was doing really well and improving at a really good rate. Other people, Bushline from the Seven Foos, I think can get really good. I think I've sat and spoke to him about the Seven Foos team and the KRA team and such, and I think he has a really good potential to develop well and continue to go from where he is. Other like maybe not as high rated players that could do really well. Jay could get quite good, I think. I know maybe not RGL statline performances because he plays in a semi-feeding position from what I've seen, but I think Jay could get really good. I think Bush could get really good, and I think Seven Nation could all get really good and be part of that next kind of generation of melee if they keep up, good development. Actually, thinking back on it, Strager, who at all was not really interested in doing group fighting at all, and I just grabbed him along. I dragged him along, sorry. He's doing really well whenever he does come to group fights. There's still things he needs to do, but his mechanics are coming along quite well, and he listens as well, which is another good benefit. So he could do quite well, and internally, I have high hopes for Armando. I don't know if you ever, listen to it, but I have high hopes for Armando. Good guy, and also another player that wants to get better. Which I think if a player wants to get better, like really wants to get better, they will get better.
I think I might be a little biased, but I definitely gotta go with Adam. He's just he's kind of great at everything, and if you need to count on someone to do something, he's definitely your guy. He'll get it done.
I'm not boosting your ego.
I think Reddish, honestly, like I think that there's a lot of people who can be pretty good at 1vx's, a lot of people who can, kind of, they can block a lot, like, they have good movement and stuff, like, I think obviously, like, you have that, Chris, Zoft can make some moves and stuff, and, Adam, everybody, but I think the person who really can kind of control a 1vx is Reddish. I think that he, if you're not playing the 1vx correctly, he will find your mistake and he will destroy you with it. Whereas like with other 1vx's, I feel like they don't have the maybe X factor that Reddish has to just win that outright.
My goal 1vx clutch player? Myself? No, so many shadow players. No, goal 1vx player? There's the kind of more obvious answer of like Reddish, but on like a personal like connection of players that I've seen do it, and I think I've had like 2 solid clutches with Adam, that like are very prominent in my mind. So I kind of have to say Adam, but obviously Reddish is really high up there in his own contention. But I beyond this year, like past this year. Previously, I don't have much mental memory of, like clutch players, or just how people play it. I don't have a set list of things outside of carry group fights.
Not at the current moment. Before, it was much more relevant because, obviously, getting to duels was more common. But, now I think, being dueling is not as fundamental as before. I think maybe learning the basics of group fighting would be better in that instance.
Would you say that like dueling has like practicing dueling will give you an advantage over someone who usually just practices group fights within a group
Uh,
fight?
Once again, I think it depends on like how it's proceeded. Because like if everything splits apart, then you probably want your dueling skills to be on the higher end, especially if you're like nearing the end in like a 1v1 situation. But besides that, like if the lines are like compact always, and like even in like regrouping situations, being good on the line and being good in group fighting triumphs being good in dueling. Especially because I feel like in dueling, people's first reaction might be to block first, where that might get your teammate killed.
Yes. You need to have an understanding of the basic mechanics of the game, stabbing, blocking, before you are trying to stab and block multiple people in front of you. I don't think there are any players that go straight into group fighting that had an easier time getting into group fighting. Players like Danny G and Rave, for instance, who grew up in a time when dueling is effectively like not a thing, and when you see them in the duel, you immediately notice it.
Yes and no. I think that you have to have a good understanding of dueling in the sense that it's like the fundamental practice of melee, right? It is your mechanics of blocking and stabbing. But I think that a lot of dueling has become like spinning and feinting and stuff, and really you don't need to spin or feint to be a good group fighter. Like you just need to straight stab. I mean, look at Star Blazer, right? Like, nobody would accuse him of being the best dueler, but he has very solid mechanics of dueling, or fundamentals of dueling, and he can use that to just straight stab people and knock down people online, and even target switch and stuff. And so, I think that you need to practice dueling because it practices the very basic mechanics of the game. But like from a group fighting perspective, you really don't need to be a duelist.
No, not at all. I think there are plenty of people that, to be vaguely inflammatory, are a bit stinky duelists, but are very good group fighters. I guess the OG example is Star, because Star was riding his peak, but if Star got down to a 1v1, he'd win it a lot of the time, but it would still be like, oh god, it's Star in a 1v1. Um, and I obviously don't actually think that he's a stinky duelist. I think he was always quite good, but
Don't worry, you're banned from NARGL.
my bad. See, 63 just disappeared from my hotbar. But I think there's other people as well. Like I don't rate Ethan as a duelist, right? Like I would always put Ethan as group fighter first. Um, who else? Wi-Fi is not a very good duelist, but is an incredible group fighter. Um, I was a bit biased because I have a 63 versus KRA screenshot open while I was looking at names. So obviously a bit.
I think you can throw in Shook in there, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Shook was always a better group fighter than a duelist. I'm gonna agree with that. Is there anybody else? Gustav. I think Gustav is a pretty decent example of somebody who's not really a duelist at all, but more of a group fighter. I mean, I'm like, I bring everything back to myself because I'm just an ego like that. But I don't think that I'm an incredible. I don't think that I'm an incredible 1v1er. I've had my moments, but I don't think I've Mickey Mouse Tonys like the 7th Fusent hosted Bendis and Tony that I beat Astro in the finals in a first to two. And the TKF Blue bracket that I came second to K-pop in. I don't think I have. I don't think that I have like an incredible history of dueling, but I do have a very good list of group fighting accomplishments and general displays. So I don't think it's an unreasonable place to slot myself. I mean, I think that every group fighter knows a bit of dueling, right? But I think that you can get, like, my initial point in the first question was, it was listening to communications, and I think you can get so far with listening to communication and having small amount of mechanics over being a really good duelist, because being a duelist doesn't teach you up downs. it maybe teaches you a decent blocking and blocking first, and a decent amount of stab control, but it doesn't necessarily teach you timings for things and other such things. So I think you don't need to be an incredible duelist to be a good group fighter, and I think you can be group fighter first duelists. Never.
I mean, I think I gotta go with NA. They showed the impact ratings, and I mean, on EU we came kind of close, but when we were on NA ping, I feel like we just triumphed over them a lot of the rounds. So I feel like NA would get the inherent advantage right now, especially since a lot of our star players are active, whereas theirs are not as active per se.
So I think I would also take NA. I might be biased though. Potentially.
Maybe just a little bit.
NAs because the EUs can't agree long enough to coordinate with each other.
Are you sure? I think that EUs would have a tactic and maybe
No, they would all be yelling at each other. They would all be yelling at each other. And while I'm pretty sure we're pretty much equal in terms of like prowess, I think NA is probably better in the open. I think EU has a better standard online. But I think that the NAs can kind of swallow ego long enough to just like coordinate and listen to each other, while the EUs would just yell at each other the entire time.
Right now, I think it's NA's by far. Like, I don't think it's close. I think that EU once upon a time was really good, and then they stopped doing pickups for 8 months, and then all their good melees left. And I think that they're gonna regrow and get that melee, get those melees back, get that skill back. But I think we kind of in NA eclipsed them a little bit and have overtaken them, if you will, in the race to the top. And I think that right now, if it were an NA versus EU All Stars match on same ping or LAN or whatever, I think NAs take it pretty easily.
Oh God. I guess there's things you take into consideration. Is it 1.5 or is it 3.0? And
XMG?
yeah.
XMG has an impact on the outcome of this group fight?
Yeah.
What?
Absolutely.
Which one is EU on now?
3.0.
What's the difference between that and 1.5?
3.0 is a lot faster. Well, not a lot faster. I could find the specific number of variables if necessary, but I don't think anybody wants me to look around for that. But I think it's a more difficult question that I think you're expecting from me.
Well, to begin with, I didn't
It's definitely a 15-14. Well, I think it's important. If like hits disabled, what's the
it's
things like that.
it's like hits don't exist on.
I think differences. Never mind then. I forgot that I told you. I kept those.
For the sake of it, we'll say
Okay.
the same settings that it was for the NA versus EU All Star match on the EU
Mhm.
server.
Okay, so 3.0. It's definitely like a 15-14 or 15-13 type thing. There's no definitive stop. I think it very much depends on who plays with who's where. But I think NA wins that. I think NA wins it. I as much as I would come and be happily stomp that good fight against the NAs. I do actually think that NA wins it just on a. There seems to be more familiarity. Obviously, there's still like the big. For EU, it's the big four, I guess, if you count this. But I would like if you asked me this a couple of months ago, I would have said I don't think the EU team gets along very well. But the EU team got along really well when we played versus NA, and there wasn't any bickering or issues. Less so than there was when we did the first EU versus NA All Stars.
It's been positive progression in the
It
sort of
is.
EU tension.
Yeah. It's such a hard question. Because I think both both regions' top players are incredible in their own right. You'd probably end up with a situation where it just comes down to like cons and mids, because I think one flank would always win from EU and one flank would always win from NA. Like, more so than the other. So you would just end up collapsing in mid. But I mean, if you give me a me and elf flank again, like we did in EU versus NA, who knows what will happen. But I think EU has the stronger cons. I think NA has the stronger mid, and I think they have equal flanks. Yeah, I mean, if I think about the two star players from each, like that I'm thinking of, like the mid, well, not the two, but like if I think of mid, and I think of Danny, Rave, yourself, and Var, and then on EU I think of Reaper, Pakuli, Die with Pride, and yeah, Joe. Well, John's been out of it for a while, so I don't know if we slot John into that mid. But I mean that, I can't think of a fourth if I don't say John. You stick Cots there, but I'm not
The fella.
too sure. At the fella, my beloved, goat of all time. Yeah, I think NA mid edges out over it, and I think EU cons edge out over NA cons. So I guess it really does just come down to open melee. In which region has the better open melee?
That's like 10
Which-
coin flips in a row.
I
Coin
think
flip.
I think the match is just 30 coin flips. To be fair, it's far too difficult for me to give a proper definitive answer, but I guess I'd say NA edges out.